Okay, time for a spot of engraving, and I'm going to be using a 1mm ball nose cutter for this because it's a little light bulb and needs to be a reasonably chunky cut, but I don't want to go too deep because then the cuts will overlap in areas and it will start to blur. I've got these rather sharp and pointy engraving bits, and these are actually quite good for doing circuit boards. You can get very fine traces with these, but I think for this particular logo it's not the ideal solution. So I'm only going to be going 200 microns into this. I've already done a test cut on the other side, and 200 looks about right. 250 is a little bit deeper and perhaps will look better, but I can always overcut this if necessary later on. I've already warmed the spindle up for about half an hour as well, because this is about ½ meter on the spindle and it expands by about 4 or 5 microns per degree C, and it doesn't sound like a great deal, but when you're only going 200 microns deep, if this warms up by say 10 degrees, well, that's adding an extra 40-50 microns to the depth, and it's going to look a bit odd. So I'll periodically recheck the depth on this thing as I go along, but we should be okay to make a start, and given I've done one on the back already and it came out reasonably well, I think we'll be alright on 200 microns, so let's give it a go. Okay, it's cut, and yeah, that's not too bad at all. So probably going to need a little bit of a redressing, a bit more of a polish on the top of that, but yeah, okay, I'm happy with that. Well, that looks like a light bulb to me. Okay, yeah, I think that will emboss quite well when it's moulded. Okay, 3 more to do. Right, this is where we're at so far. Base plate is done with the core blocks now screwed in place from behind, and they look okay, and our caps will just sit over them like that. The top plate is now done. I've deburred the edges here with a bit of fine wire wool and a bit of cutting fluid, and then repolished it, so that's looking nice and shiny. And then we need a surround plate cutting, which is the last part of the job. This will obviously have 4 square holes in it to create the outside of the caps, and then we need this little bit of an overhang, so there'll be a machined overhang on the top surface. And the idea is when I lift this plate up, it should pull the caps up and off these core blocks and leave them sitting in here, and then I can just pop them out from the rear. So a couple of vents on the underside, perhaps a few bolt holes and all the rest of it, but mostly it's just pocketing these squares out, and then we're pretty close to having a go at moulding it. Right. Okay, we've got, get that out, there we go, got some magnet holes, our guide pin holes, the feed well and the runner, and then I've just taken out the bulk of the section that I'm going to machine square. So the next step will be cutting some side flanges on here, and these are going to be stepped up, and then it's just a case of pocketing out those square bits in the middle. So they're very nearly done. Apart from some feed gates on the top and a bit of venting on the bottom, that is our surround plate complete. So, not very far off moulding it now. That, I think, is everything. Right, that's the vents. So let's have a look. Well, that needs a little bit of a deburr, but otherwise that's the rear and that's the front. So I think we're about ready to have a go at moulding it. This is the finished mould, and I've already given it a quick spin in a soft polyurethane. I'm getting a few issues filling the cavities, which is almost certainly just a venting problem. So I'm going to put this back on the machine and just open these vents up slightly. They're currently about 50 microns deep. I think I'll go to 100, which hopefully will fix it, and there's plenty of room on there to put some other ones on. The logos have come out quite well, just about visible if I catch them in the light. Not a great contrast on the white material, but it's what was in the machine, and they're a pretty good fit. Nice slimline design with the wings on the edge, which aren't too obtrusive. I haven't put the little grip lugs on the side yet because I'm not entirely certain I'm going to be using this material. I've got quite a lot of it, so that's what I was planning on using. But I've also got quite a lot of this silver stuff. This is a thermoplastic polyolefin, which is very similar to the material that the original end caps were made from. This is probably a high density polyethylene, and I thought this silver effect, it's actually a tungsten metallic, might look quite nice as a contrast to the black. And the other good thing about this is, unlike the polyurethane, I don't actually have to dry it. So I'm going to open those gates up, warm up the moulding machine, and just give it a quick spin with this stuff and see how they come out. And I expect this will probably shrink more than the polyurethane does, so depending on which material I go for, that's going to determine how wide I make the grips on the side. But we'll see how it moulds first. And here is the Sequal, quite literally, because that's what this material is called, Sequal 1480. It's an impact modified and UV stabilised polyolefin, and I think it's mostly aimed at the automotive trade for doing bumper trims and things like that on cars. So it's not bad material, it moulds quite easily. A little tiny bit of sinking on the top, but I might be able to get rid of that with a bit of tweaking on the process settings. I've literally only done a handful of these just to test it out, and they do fit. They're a little bit looser than the polyurethane ones. These are a slightly tighter fit. So there has been a bit of shrinkage on this stuff, which is fairly typical of a polyolefin. I think it's about 1%ish, 1.5%. And according to my notes, the internal diameter of the tube is 16.2 millimeters, give or take a few tens of microns. And I've cut the mould initially to 15.6. This is retaining those dimensions because it doesn't shrink a great deal, but these have shrunk down to about 15.45. I'm measuring that out at. So I think in order to make this a press fit into there, I need to just add some lugs around the sides that are maybe about 400 microns on each side, and that'll block it out by almost a millimetre, and that should get us close. So to do that, I'm going to use a 4mm ball nose, the idea being that the bottom of these lugs is going to be slightly radiused, and I think I'll probably need to go a little bit deeper than the plate itself, so I'll need to block this up and maybe go down, I think it's 10mm plate, so I'll probably go down 11mm and just take a slight nibble out of the sides and then we'll give it another mould and see how well we do, and if I need to come in and take a little bit more, that won't be too much of a problem. But yeah, certainly looking a lot better. It's filling now. The slightly larger vents only added about 25 to 50 microns on the venting, but it makes a big difference in terms of moulding them, so I'm not getting the short shots on the bottom now. So yeah, it's looking good. I'm just going to chop this up, nibble a bit out, and then we'll have another go at moulding it. I've checked this and double checked it, both off the alignment for the plate using my referencing slots. I've also come in against the edges and made double sure, and I seem to be out by no more than a few tens of microns. In fact, according to the software, I was out by about 10 microns. As usual, the safe money is on failure. They do still fit in, but they're a little bit loose. So I only ran a few of them off, not wasting too much time on it. I mean, they're pretty close, but I wasn't happy. So I went in and pecked away a little bit more on the edges, and this has got quite a robust lug on the side now, and it goes practically to the bottom, and these push in quite nicely, and there's no slack there at all. And there is a slight difference between the two ends of the tube, so I've had to take that into account, because there's obviously going to be some differences when they're actually assembling these things, but that fits pretty well, certainly better than the originals. That's quite loose by comparison, whereas these are a good snug fit, and I think they go on that way round. So yeah, reasonably happy with the end result there, and these do give a nice contrast to the black metal. I can't see any significant blemishes in the thing, and they do look pretty good outdoors actually. The lighting in here doesn't really do justice to them, but outside in sunlight they really are quite sparkly and silvery, and I think these things are going to be used to some extent outdoors, so that'll be a nice added bonus. But anyway, I can't show you that tonight because the sun's gone down. So I'll call that quits and send a few over and see what they think, and if they want me to run off a couple of thousand of these, then that'll keep me busy for a day or two. Well, this is what a couple of hundred of them look like. That took about, I don't know, 45 minutes or so, probably a bit longer with the setting up, getting the machine stable. Wasn't terribly difficult, no shorting, no flashing, not a great deal of sinking on any of these. So if you can imagine a pile 10 times that size, that's now one I've got to run off, and I think that will probably take a couple of days, to be honest. I don't think I'll get it done in one day, but this will get some initial stock up to the end user, and we'll take it from there. And here's a close-up of the finished moulding. If I shine it in the light, you can probably see there's some silvery speckles in this plastic. I think it may have some mica flakes in it, but the logo's come out pretty well. The moulding is nice and clean, there's no obvious sinking, no shorting, no flashing. The bottom side looks good. You can see the little ridges I've cut on the edge to give it a bit of grip, and most importantly, it does fit quite snugly in the end of the tube. There's a very slight gap around the top, and I think that's because there is actually a slight lip on the edge of the tubing, possibly from the coating process, and because my grip lugs go right the way up vertically to the bottom of this sill, that's fouling very slightly. I mean, if you push hard it goes in, but it's not quite as slick as the original ones, and that would explain why they've gone to the trouble of a mould which has to open sideways as well as top to bottom, because they've put the lugs horizontally so that when they're in the tube they're gripping slightly lower down rather than fouling that top edge. So caps and closures, there you go, it's a slightly more sophisticated area than you might imagine, but they have got some sinking on the top of this, and the moulding, the grips on it don't look great. So comparing the two, I think we've probably done okay, and there they are side by side. So reasonable result, I'm quite pleased with that.